Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the channel. Happy Saturday, everybody. Hope your day and your weekend have been going very well so far. Got a new day, which of course means a new MLB Player Prop video to share with you guys. But first, as always, people, please make sure to go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and drop a comment down below. It helps the channel grow, and it really does mean a ton to us. With a new day comes some new opportunities to go ahead and make some money. I have 4 MLB player props to go ahead and share with you guys in today's MLB slate. But first, guys, before we dive into today's picks, we do have to do a quick little recap of how we did last night. Yesterday was Freaky Friday, so we, of course, had our Freaky Friday 5-leg parlay. We did hit 3 out of 5 legs, so it wasn't a complete failure, but obviously in a parlay, one loses, the whole thing loses. Jack Cutcher, now it's over 2.5 strikeouts. The line was low for a reason. We got it. He only had 1 strikeout. The Angels actually got shelled yesterday by Houston. Then Spencer Torkelson, he's only missed that player prop like 3 or 4 times this year, and I swear to God, every single time he misses is the days that we bet on him. But we did hit Bobby Witt Jr., Jung-Hoo Lee, and Aaron Nola, but at the end of the day, again, it's a parlay, so it doesn't really matter how many you hit. If you don't hit all of them, it's a loss. But we've got a new day. We got a fresh 4 new player props. These are all single bets, and I'm really excited to go ahead and share them with you guys. Let's finish this week off strong. 4 player props coming your way right now. Wasting no time, guys, jumping right into the outlier screen. Our first player prop in today's slate comes from the Giants-Yankees game, 3:05 p.m. first pitch. We've got Aaron Judge of the New York Yankees over 1.5 hits, runs, RBIs. Now, this player prop is definitely juiced, -140 over on DraftKings, but it's a really good player prop, so I think it's still worth it, even if the odds aren't the best. By the way, guys, all 4 player props in today's video, we're going to throw half a unit on these. We're still sticking with the half a unit plays because we've obviously been off to a really cold start to the year, and I don't want to keep losing massive amounts of units. So until we start turning things around and winning on a more consistent basis, we're going to stick with half a unit plays, and then once we kind of turn this ship around, we'll increase those to full unit plays. So this is a half a unit play. All 4 plays today are half unit plays. And it's -140 odds, but the value is so strong here in terms of the data. 7 of his last 10 games, Aaron Judge has cashed the over. That's, of course, a 70% hit rate, averaging 2.6 hits, runs, RBIs per game over the last 10 games. So far this year, a 77% hit rate on this over. 10 out of 13 games this year, he's cashed the over, averaging 3.92 hits, runs, RBIs per games. Of course, if he hits a home run, automatically it's a cash because he gets a hit, a run, and an RBI. But, you know, that's, I think, the beauty of Aaron Judge is if he hits a home run, you don't have to worry about anything else. But he does have these games where he just doesn't get on base at all. But the data is pretty strong. And from a head-to-head perspective, he had cashed this in 3 consecutive meetings with the San Francisco Giants. All 3 of those games, of course, dating back to last season. But had cashed in 3 straight games going into yesterday's matchup with the Giants, where he did miss it. Again, 0 hits, 0 runs, 0 RBIs, and what was a 9-1 win for San Francisco. But overall, pretty good. Like I said, even last year, he cashed this at a 56% hit rate, including playoffs. 97 out of 172 games, he cashed this over for the Yankees last year, averaging 2.74 hits, runs, RBIs per game. So across the board, some really strong data here for Aaron Judge. We also have the insights provided by Outlier. This data does take us back to last year as well, but pretty good numbers across the board. Aaron Judge has exceeded 1.5 hits, runs, RBIs in 12 of his last 15 games, dating back to the World Series against the Dodgers. He's averaging 3.9 hits, runs, RBIs per game over the last 15 games. The majority of that is this year. Only 2 games in that 15-game data set date back to the World Series, but most of those, 13 of those 15, obviously, are this year's data. So some pretty good numbers here for Judge. Looking down below at the key matchup stats versus Jordan Hicks, he's had 6 plate appearances against Hicks since 2018. Pretty good numbers. He got 2 hits, 2 home runs, and 4 RBIs. So both of his hits were home runs off of him. That's a pretty good sign for us here. Overall, Aaron Judge, we're still using last year's data, but using last year's data, 322 batting average, he was slightly higher up versus right-handed pitchers, but it's basically the same numbers. Jordan Hicks, however, his numbers do decrease when facing right-handed batters, but even at those decreased numbers, I still like the spot for Jordan Hicks in this matchup. 3.90 ERA, 2.46 batting average allowed, 1 home run per 9 innings, and 3.03 WOBA allowed. Again, they're all decreases from his overall numbers when in comparison to his numbers versus left-handed batters, for example. But it's still, even at the decreased line, he's clearly a better pitcher versus righties, but still pretty good matchup for Aaron Judge. And one last thing before we move on to the next player prop, guys, is Aaron Judge versus Jordan Hicks' pitch arsenal. And the number one pitch Jordan Hicks uses, from last year's data, of course, maybe that changes this year, but but he heavily utilized the sinker. 51.4% of his pitches were sinkers. And look at Aaron Judge versus the sinker. Pretty good numbers. 517 WOBA is insane. 18.3 strikeout percentage. Now versus the slider, which was his second most utilized pitch, you do see a higher strikeout rate for Judge. However, his WOBA, which also decreases, 394 is still a pretty decent WOBA. So I think overall, the fact that the sinker, he has such great numbers against. And even the splitter, he has a 591 WOBA. However, his strikeout percentage is massive, 39.1%. Against the splitter. I think for the most part, you got a pretty good matchup across the board here. All right, guys, our second player prop in today's slate comes from the Blue Jays-Orioles game, 4:05 p.m. first pitch. We've got Tyler O'Neill of the Baltimore Orioles under 1.5 hits, runs, RBIs. We're getting that for -140 over on BetMGM. Again, a little juiced here, but definitely worth it. The data is certainly solid. 8 of his last 10 games, he's cashed the under, averaging 1.6 hits, runs, RBIs per game over his last 10 games. He had 2 pretty big performances, that game versus Boston back on March 31st, and then again on Kansas City on April 5th. A couple big games that kind of raised his average up, but for the most part, he's been cashing this under pretty consistently. Go ahead and stretch the data out the entire season view. 8 out of 11 games, only 1 extra game in the data range. 73% hit rate. Now that extra game was versus Toronto in the season opener. He went off against them. 3 hits, 3 runs, and 3 RBIs back in the season opener for Baltimore. But majority of the season, 73% hit rate. Pretty good numbers on the under here for Tyler O'Neill. But when he has hit, he goes off, that's for sure. But even looking at last year's data, he had a 53% hit rate on this under. He did average 2.09 hits, runs, RBIs per game last year, so his average was higher than this line, but he did cash this the majority of the time last year. Now, from a head-to-head perspective, also pretty good data. 9 of his last 15 matchups against Toronto dating back to last year, he's cashed the under. That is, of course, a 60% hit rate, averaging 2.27 hits, runs, RBIs per game over those last 15 matchups. They played 3 times so far this year. He's cashed the under in 2 of those 3 games. Again, we talked about already that March 27th performance where he had 3, 3, and 3 across hits, runs, RBIs. Definitely something to look at. He has some pretty big games in the books here against Toronto. But I think overall, again, 60% hit rate on this under. A lot of games where he just adds nothing to the stat sheet. Looking down below at the key matchup stats against Bowden Francis, who is the starter for Toronto in this game. He's kind of a small sample size, but 4 plate appearances against Bowden Francis dating back to 2018. He has not gotten anything. No hits, no runs, no RBIs, and he struck out in 2 of those 4 plate appearances. And it gets even better for us. Not as good for Tyler O'Neill, former Boston Red Sox guy. Going down below to the key matchup stats, 241 batting average overall last year. Those numbers versus right-handed pitchers did drop to 208. So definitely a worse hitter versus right-handed pitchers in comparison to left-handed pitchers. His WRC plus drops to 90.6. And also what's good for us here is Bowden Francis last year, some really good numbers. And honestly, versus right-handed batters, you don't really see any increases. They're not really major decreases either, but the numbers are pretty good. 194 batting average allowed, 1.4 home runs per 9, 270 WOBA. The only thing that you see a little bit of a massive increase is the ERA from 330 to 377, but overall, I still like this. A pretty good matchup across the board here for this under for Tyler O'Neill. Looking at the pitch arsenal now, Bowden Francis heavily utilized the fastball. 51.4% of his pitches were fastballs. Now, his WOBA for Tyler O'Neill is actually pretty solid. 384 is not a bad number, but what's good for us here is the strikeout rate is very high, 31.7%. That's what we like to see. His other most utilized pitches, the splitter, taking a look at that. WOBA does take a nice little dip there, 292, and also 30.8% strikeout rate, so that's pretty good. Only faced 43 pitches like that, so kind of a small sample size. And then the cutter, 51.6% strikeout rate is insane, and the WOBA 342. It is a little bit of an increase, and it's not a terrible number, but it's not a great number either. Again, we're looking at WOBA. Over 300 generally is a pretty decent number. Over 400 is really good. So 342 it's okay. For -140 odds, I think it's pretty solid value. That's our second player prop in today's slate. All right, guys, for our third player prop in today's slate, we're moving on to the Angels-Astros game, 7:10 p.m. first pitch. We're going Jose Altuve of the Houston Astros over 1.5 hits, runs, RBIs. We're getting this one for -130 over on DraftKings. All these picks, guys, by the way, are available on multiple sportsbooks for varying odds. Make sure, as always, to shop around for the best sportsbook odds available. And by the way, we are about to hit the 10-minute mark in today's video, so I want to take this chance real quick before we continue on with the data for this Altuve prop to say thank you for watching. We always support those. We always appreciate the support of those who watch all the way through each and every video. So if you are still watching, comment 10 down below in the comment section. We just want to go ahead and see who's still rocking with us at this point in the video. Again, even if you're just here for the picks, we still welcome you, but obviously those who do watch through all the analysis, all the work that we put into it, we really do have an extra appreciation for your guys. So comment 10 down below if you are still watching this point in today's video. So Jose Altuve over 1.5 hits, runs, RBIs. He's cashed this in 8 of his last 10 games. That's, of course, an 80% hit rate, averaging 2.9 hits, runs, RBIs per game over his last 10. Pretty good run of late for Jose Altuve. So far this year, a 77% hit rate on this over, 10 out of 13 games. He's cashed the over, averaging 2.69 hits, runs, RBIs per game this year. So some pretty good numbers across the board. From a head-to-head standpoint, a 69... Pause for applause. 69% hit rate from a head-to-head perspective. 9 of his last 13 matchups against the division rival LA Angels. He's cashed the over, averaging 2.69 hits, runs, RBIs per game over those last 13 matchups. 0.69. Another pause for applause there. So pretty, actually, isn't all 2.69, 2.9. So pretty good numbers across the board here and pretty consistent for Altuve. Even looking at last year, I mean, he had a 56% hit rate, averaging 2.23 hits, runs, RBIs per game. So some pretty good numbers across the board. He has played them once so far this year. Yesterday, March 11th, the first game of this series, he had 1 hit and 1 run and was a massive win for the Astros. Looking down below at the key matchup stats, Jose Altuve versus Tim Anderson. We have a very large sample size here to go off of 27 plate appearances against Tim Anderson, dating all the way back to 2018. A 360 batting average and a 407 OBP against Tim Anderson. 9 hits, 1 home run, 2 RBIs. A lot of hits, which obviously is the key thing here. Very low strikeout rate, 7.4%. So some really good numbers there. And again, 27 plate appearances is a pretty decent sample size when we're talking about a batter versus a pitcher matchup. And it kind of just gets better down below. Jose Altuve last year, 295 batting average overall, 127.5 WRC plus. However, versus left-handed pitchers, a smaller sample size, yes, but his numbers massively increased. 370 batting average last year against lefties with a 179.2 WRC plus. So some really good numbers there for Altuve. For Tim Anderson, not the best matchup of all time, but it's also not a bad matchup. 381 ERA overall last year, 232 batting average allowed, 308 WOBA. Versus right-handed batters, you do see some decreases and some minor increases. His ERA has a slight drop. His batting average allowed has a slight increase. Home runs per 9 innings and WOBA, both minor drops. So pretty consistent numbers across the board, regardless if it's a lefty or a righty batter. Like I said, not the best matchup stats you'd like to see from a pitching perspective, but pretty good history versus Tim Anderson. Altuve's got some really good numbers. Again, looking at Altuve versus Tim Anderson's pitch arsenal. So Tim Anderson heavily relied on the fastball. 39.6% of his pitches were fastballs. Jose Altuve versus fastballs last year, pretty low, 15.6% strikeout rate, 386 WOBA, which again is a solid number. Not the best, not a great. I mean, we have players who have better numbers, but 386 WOBA is pretty solid. Again, 400 is like elite. 386 is pretty good. Versus the changeup, 37.1%. The numbers do decrease, a little alarming there. 20% strikeout rate, 338 WOBA. Still not a bad. Again, over 300 is pretty solid. So 338 is not bad. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say 338 is amazing, but pretty solid numbers. Versus the cutter, 18.6%. Excuse me. Gets a little bit better. 16.3% strikeout rate, 373 WOBA. So across the board, pretty good numbers here and a pretty solid player prop. From -130 odds too. Pretty solid value. And last but not least, guys, our 4th player prop in today's slate. We move on to the Rangers-Mariners game, 9:40 p.m. first pitch. We got Adolis Garcia under 1.5 hits, runs, RBIs. We're getting this one for -150 over on DraftKings. Again, we're back to sort of the juiced odds here. Still worth it, though, in my opinion. Now, 7 of the last 10 games, he's gone ahead and cashed this under. That is, of course, a 70% hit rate, averaging 0.9 hits, runs, RBIs per game. Now, he has cashed the over in 3 consecutive games coming into today, which is a little concerning, I won't lie. But the overall numbers are pretty good here. You see a lot of games where he just doesn't register any hits at all. Look at the overall numbers in 2025 thus far. A 64% hit rate on this under. 9 out of 14 games, he's cashed the under, averaging 1.36 hits, runs, RBIs per game this year. So like I said, overall, the data is pretty solid, but you do see some games in there that do cause a little bit of concern. He's actually on like a 4-game hitting streak right now going into today's game. So he could be due for a no-hit game. He also could continue the hitting streak. So we'll go ahead and see about that. From a head-to-head perspective against the Seattle Mariners, 8 of his last 13 matchups against Seattle, he's cashed the under. That is a 62% hit rate, averaging 1.23 hits, runs, RBIs per game against Seattle. They have played one time this year, yesterday, back on April 11th. Again, I mentioned yesterday. He had one hit and one run in what was a 5-3 loss for Texas. So not like he had a crazy good game yesterday, but he did cash the over, so that's pretty good. Going down below to the key matchup stats for Garcia. Numbers are pretty solid. Brian Wu versus Adolis Garcia since 2018. 9 plate appearances, just one hit. Now that one hit was a home run, but a 143 batting average, 333 OBP against Brian Wu with a 44.4% strikeout percentage when facing off with Brian Wu since 2018. So pretty good numbers there. Looking at Adolis Garcia, again, we're still using last year's numbers, which I still don't like, but we got to wait a little more time before Outlier can update these stats. Usually after like 20 games or so, we start to see the updated stats for 2025, at least for the hitters, I should say. Now, Garcia last year, 224 batting average, 222 batting average versus right-handed pitchers. Again, pretty much the same numbers across the board. Some minor decreases when he faces off with right-handed pitchers, but you don't have to be a diehard baseball fanatic or analyst guy to know that 222 batting average is not very good. 89.0 WRC plus, a little bit of a decrease from his 91.9 mark. And looking at Brian Wu here down below, pretty good numbers across the board, but his numbers do decrease versus right-handed batters by a decent amount each category. Some minor, some pretty decent. His ERA drops from 289 to 247, batting average allowed from 211 to 200, home runs per 9, minor decrease from 1 to 0.9, and his WOBA from 249 to 235. So a lot of green there, pretty consistent drops across the board. Again, some more significant, couldn't find the word there, more significant than others, but across the board, that's what you like to see. 200 batting average allowed is pretty solid. Now, Brian Wu heavily relied last year on the fastball. 49% of his pitches were fastballs. Looking down below here, Adolis Garcia, pretty good numbers. 33.8% strikeout rate last year versus fastballs. Pretty good numbers. Pretty high pitch. He had a lot of pitches faced that were fastballs. 249 WOBA, so a nice number there for us, for our purposes. Now, Brian Wu also heavily relied on the sinker. Numbers a little bit better, lower strikeout rate, higher WOBA, so he had more success versus the sinker than he certainly had against the fastball. And then versus the slider last year, strikeout rate goes up a lot higher, WOBA goes lower. So two of his three major pitches, the fastball and the slider, pretty good matchup here. The sinker, Garcia's okay against, again, lower strikeout rate, higher WOBA. But for the most part here, I think got a really good matchup on our hands. For minus 150, a little juiced, but I still think worth it. All right, guys, that is it for me today. Thank you very much, as always, for watching. One more time, guys, please make sure to go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and drop a comment down below. We'll be back on Monday with another MLB Player Prop video, but until then, I hope you're all winners. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your Sunday, Palm Sunday, if you are a church-going Christian or whatever. I don't judge, but, it is Palm Sunday tomorrow, so if you are going to church tomorrow, have a good Palm Sunday. They start of Holy Week, and so we'll see you guys back here on Monday. Until then, hope you're all winners. Let's go ahead and make some money.